Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it is time in War Thunder to talk about a topic which I've been meaning to talk about since update 1.99. This is the copy-paste vehicles that have been added to the Italian tree, and also by extension stuff such as the French copy-paste vehicles such as the M4A4, and also machines such as the fact that we got 7 F104s added to the game in update 1.99. And a lot of them, yes, they're slightly different from each other, but at the end of the day, they all give you a very similar experience in the game. And I want to attack it from my personal point of view, if I'm honest. It's the easiest thing to do, and also something that I've been thinking about over this last month, really. And unfortunately, some of the things that I was worried about when it came to these new Italian vehicles has come true, and we'll go through it. And the main idea is to give my opinion on it, but also be able to offer solutions. And thank you to certain members, such as Conte Baraka, for helping me be able to find the specific areas. And I want to make this more kind of like a past the developers video, basically going through different areas, showing you the different options that are available instead of the ones that we were given in the game. So first of all, let's talk about my opinion on these vehicles. Well, the reason why I have my start card up is for a very specific reason, and it's to show you the amount of time I put into the game. It's a long time. You know, I've been level 100 for many years now. I have played a ton of missions, especially in RB and AB, and the reason for this is because even though War Thunder is a game which the game modes themselves, I would say, are very repetitive, the maps are not, and also the vehicles themselves are not. There is a lot of new and interesting experiences every time when it is added to the game, whether it be in the form of naval, whether it be in the form of air, whether it be in the form of ground. And it's something that keeps me playing War Thunder, especially since I'm very interested in the history of a lot of the vehicles, especially the ones pertaining to the Second World War. It's a way that I can personally connect my hobby of history and gaming. It's two ways that meld together in a really great fashion, and it means I can learn a lot about stuff through the community and generally through the game as well. Now, over the last month or so, I've been streaming quite a lot on Twitch. The reason for this is because I have been unable to work. Basically due to a medical condition, I have been relaxing at home, which is the first time I've done this for a while. You know, I've been basically working straight for about 8 years. And what I found is I decided to, every time I stream, set myself a goal. Whether it was to spade a vehicle, whether it was to research a vehicle, whether it was to grind a decal from the authentic decals, I always had a goal. And before the update came out, when the dev servers launched, and what happened was, you know, we had all of the vehicles which were just, well, pretty much straight copy and paste. There was a few differences, but then I will point you towards the M4A4s, where there is literally no difference. And my general idea was, okay, I need to get a feel of what this is going to feel like in the Italian tree. So what I did was I decided to grind out all the M48s. I decided to grind out a lot of the M60s. If you don't know, the M48 is a vehicle that is in 3 separate TEP trees in the form of the M48A1. There are very minor differences between the 3 M48s. And they also have the worst stock grind in game because they get wonderful APCR as a stock round, which doesn't really do a lot. The experience was terrible. It was not fun. It was good on the research point of view because they are all around 7073 and they are rank 5 vehicles, so therefore you can research rank 6 vehicles, which normally go up to like 10-0, so therefore research wise it's very good. But at the same time, until you got the key modifications, it was very hard to play these vehicles. And after playing the third one over that period of time, which may have been a week or two, it really ground on me, the fact that I had to do this. It really got to me when I was finishing the German M48, which technically should be the easiest M48 to finish because it's the lowest BR. And the fact is, when it comes to War Thunder, what I'm looking for is different experiences. What I'm looking for, as you can see through my stats here when it comes to the vehicles and the rewards, I try and play every nation equally. The reason for this is because when I started playing War Thunder, there was only really 5 nations. There was USA, USSR, Great Britain, Germany, and also Japan. All 5 of these nations offered massively different experiences to each other from the aviation point of view. They hardly had any copy-paste vehicles, and the only ones which were stuff such as captured vehicles, such as the captured Pz.III or the Wellington for the Germans, or something like the Corsair, or something like the Zero for the Americans. These were all premiums. You hardly ever saw them, maybe like one a match, and it was nice. It basically meant that whatever you decided to play, you got different experiences in. Now, the addition of Italy, France, China, and Sweden, I've tried to grind them all equally. As I just talked about, the idea of grinding each nation equally is something that I've been trying to do. I'm either rank 6 or rank 7 when it comes to all of the ground forces for each of the nations. When it comes to aviation, I'm either rank 5 or rank 6, and for naval, the ones which have it, I've tried to get all of the destroyers researched, even though with the recent additions, I'm not there yet, but I will get there. And the idea is to try and keep a level head on where the meta is, try and understand, at least from, let's say, BR1 to about BR8, of what the game feels like from each different perspective, and to comment on stuff like BR changes, and to comment on general changes, so I understand what's going on. I'm never going to be a person who is only going to play one tree. I find that incredibly boring, because that one tree can only give me so many experiences. There's only so many Shermans that you can play, there's only so many Centurions you can play, and Chieftains. They all feel very much the same in playstyle as you play them, and therefore I must find different experiences and different trees. And that's what I've done over the time. But over the last few updates, what we have seen is we have seen a massive addition of what would be seen as copy-paste vehicles. Now, Sweden has come out with their aviation and their ground, and overall, they haven't had any copy-paste vehicles, but at least in the aviation, you have a bunch of the same, or a bunch of very similar J-29s with slightly different guns, or you have a bunch of J-21s which all fly the same, or you have 2 J-22s which fly the same. The amount of actual unique models in that aviation tree is very lackluster. You also do have the Reggiani 2000 in there, so there is a copy-paste vehicle even in that tech tree. We had China added. Need I say more? China is, to a new player, kind of actually a good idea, because you get kind of the best of both worlds when it comes to the American and the Soviet vehicles, with a few others sprinkled in. But at the same time, to a person like me, a person who has played War Thunder for a very long time, China is incredibly frustrating to play. Even at the point where I am now, at 8.7, because I am still playing an M60 at 8.7. So yeah, or well, not an M60, but an M60 hybrid, let's call it. And then France, even over the most recent updates, what has been added to France is, of course, the Mirage, which is a wonderful addition. But then you have a look at other stuff. You have the F100. You have machines such as the M4 rifle. You have, obviously, the Jumbo that was added when the tree was released, and you have a bunch of other vehicles such as the Crusader and the M3A3, which were also added to it, which are all copy-paste vehicles. And this is not even talking about Italy, which is the main point of this video. It is just to show you that over the last year or so, there has been a massive push to add very similar vehicles to different tech trees, or not even just similar, the same vehicles. And as a person who comes from a point of playing different tech trees to get different experiences, this is horrible. It really, really is. Because it means that, you know, oh, well, you get full-on lineups now. Wonderful. It doesn't matter to me. Because the fact is, when it comes to, if I have 1 or 2 or 3 vehicles of a similar BR, I only run 5 vehicles in a match at all times. So all I need really is generally 3 respawns when it comes to most of these ground realistic or air realistic modes, which I only need 1. That is my general modus operandi in the game. I don't use more than that. There is no need for me to have a 10 stack lineup. There is no point in me for having a 10 stack crew, because the amount of times you actually use that is 1 out of 100, and therefore just not required at all. And to see these nations be filled with vehicles that I've already played, and vehicles that I've already spaded in other tech trees, makes me feel, very much bored. And this was something that started when it came to the Japanese tech tree, back when the ground tech tree was released. They added the Chaffee, they added the Bulldog, and they added a few others, such as the 76 Sherman, because it was seen that Japan didn't have a central part of their tech tree, because obviously of conditions when it came to history. And it's like, fair enough, because they have a lot of stuff in like the STAs, the STBs, they've added a lot of unique vehicles since then. They haven't really added to the issue, but now what we're seeing is a change, where we're looking at other nations, such as Italy and France, where you had the uniqueness added in the first place, and now you are having the copy-paste added after, which is just kind of an odd way of doing things, at least from my point of view. So my main point is, over the last year or so, there have been a lot of vehicles added which are just the same as vehicles that we've seen before. Now, I don't put this entirely down to laziness. I think there are multiple factors going on here. There is obviously the fact that when we have a look at War Thunder as a whole, there is a push by a lot of people who play very specific tech trees in order to be able to have fully done lineups. One of the things that, at least in my travels in the War Thunder community, that I found is a lot of people main 1, 2, maybe 3 nations. Most of the time it's 2. A lot of people play something like the Soviets and the Germans, or they play something like the Americans and the Germans, and therefore they don't get all of the experience from the minor tech trees. Now, I might be wrong on this, but this is pretty much the majority of people that I've talked to, bar a very small minority of people who do play, a lot of the tech trees. I can think of people like Tubo. I can think of people like Dog, who tries different experiences. I can think of people like me, who try a lot of different experiences. But the majority of people in the game focus on 1 or 2 tech trees, and they focus on one single part of the game, whether it be ground, whether it be aviation, whether it be naval, whatever it is. And this means that you have an option. So let's say you have individuals who play a lot of US. How do you get them to try and play other tech trees? Because what they do is they look at other tech trees, such as these 3, or these 5, sorry, and think they're inferior because they don't have as many vehicles as the US, they don't have as many options as the US. So the way to get these US players to play these tech trees is to add US vehicles to them, so therefore there's a form of familiarity, and also there is a form of filling out these, these nations. So therefore they are more competitive against the 3 major nations of the USA, the USSR, and also Germany. That is generally the way that I see it, right? And this has been confirmed by Gadget a few times. Some of the community managers have talked about the idea that a lot of community members have been clamoring for vehicles to be able to set up in like rank 2 and rank 3, so therefore certain BRs have specific lineups around them, so therefore you can play them to a more competitive level against stuff like USA, Great Britain, Germany, and so on and so forth. And this is a fix to that issue. I think it is it's probably the easiest fix, and the one which costs the least amount of money, which is probably why it happens. Because if we talk about machines like the Char D2, which was added, I think a lot of machines like the Char D2 are loss leaders at lower tiers. If you think about the amount of money that somebody is going to GE, if they are going to GE, or even pay for something like a Char D2, it's a hell of a lot less than something like an F-104. So therefore, the starts of the tech trees are probably lost leaders, and therefore the tops of the tech trees are where Gaijin really makes the money. So they need a quick and simple fix in order to, look at rank 1 and rank 2, try and fix them for each nation to make the grind easier for those people who play the major nations, and at the same time for the people who are clamoring for these tech trees, but also doesn't cost too much. So what is the perfect option? Well, what we have, copy-paste vehicles. But from my point of view, who doesn't necessarily look at it from always the monetary point of view, even though it is a factor in my thinking, it just makes the game incredibly boring. And that is the general issue when it comes to this all the time. Because playing the same thing over and over again is not fun. Some people can do it. You have very high-skilled players who can play stuff such as the T-34-85 thousands of times. You have the individual who just plays the A-20G, and he's played it over 1,000 matches just by itself. This is fun for a very small minority of people, but I can't see the majority of people going, I can't wait to play another M10. I can't wait to play another Chaffee, which is exactly the same. And the last thing I want to put onto the personal opinion part before we go into solutions, specifically for the Italian copy-paste stuff, is the fact that I was on stream the other day, and I was playing Japan 4.7. And the reason I was playing this was to do the authentic decal, get the 2000s in the ground. And so I was running around in the Cheeto Lates, the Cheeto, and the Chino 2. A very powerful lineup. Even though they're all not at 4.7, they all can easily hold their weight at 4.7. So I was playing it, and I was just around the south point on the new Italy map, and an M4A4 walks past me. Now, I had to double take. Because this M4A4, he didn't have a name above his head, so he was an enemy, but at the same time, he was covered in Italian markings. And what I mean is he was covered in the Italian squadron markings, and he was covered in Italian decals. So, to me, at first glance, he looked like an ally. And then on second glance, as he was moving past me, so he had about maybe 1 to 2.5 seconds to shoot me, so I would have been dead at this point, I decided to shoot him. It turns out it was a Chinese M4A4. Now, there's no differences between the M4A4s in the game, apart from the premium one for China, which gets a 50 cal. So what you have here is you have a situation where a player is using a Chinese vehicle, they are covering it in Italian markings to obscure the fact that they are using a Chinese vehicle. And then that same player, after being killed in the M4A4, brings in a Chaffee with exactly the same Italian markings. And the only reason I noticed it then was because, of course, I was looking for it now. Now imagine, that's unrealistic. Now imagine if that happens in Simulator. Imagine if that happens to a person who doesn't recognize what's going on and just looks at the markings and goes, okay, well, that's, somebody on my team. It's going to be incredibly annoying to fight, and that is something which is a problem. As a person who is generally against stuff like captured premiums and stuff, and I'm very glad that when Kirill talked about it, last year in the Q&A, they said that the community gave some negative feedback when it came to captured premiums, which is why in general, they've at least lessened the amount that they've added. It's very weird to me that you could have a statement such as, we don't really like captured premium vehicles, but at the same time we are fine with captured or lend-lease or copy-paste vehicles in the tech trees. It just seems weird. Like, they don't match up as two ideas. But anyway, that's my general perspective on it. I think what's done is done. The American vehicles are not being removed from the Italian tech tree. It's not happening, and the idea, the belief that it can happen, I think, is incredibly, it's incredible. It's very much wishful thinking. But I also think that even though the decision has already been made to add these vehicles, it is time to give alternate solutions at the same time, so hopefully in the future these ideas or these thoughts can be considered if this idea is going to go forward once again for either another tech tree or for once again the Italians again, if for some reason in a year or so they decide that certain BRs need bolstering again. So let's get started, because there is a bunch of really cool vehicles which could easily be added to the Italian tech tree, which are already on the forums, and would even be as easy to add as stuff such as the ones that we have been added. So first of all, this was from Panzer 1972, right? Now this is talking about Division M. Now if you don't know what Division M is, this is Mussolini's personal division, or the Black Shirts as they are known. Now they are very, very important historically. They're also not exactly the kindest of divisions, let's put it. So if you want to look into the history, I highly recommend it. It is very interesting from a general personal point of view. Now let's talk about what vehicles the Division M actually used, because they were one of the only Italian brigades, or one of the only Italian divisions to use German vehicles, and also to be used after the armistice by the Germans with German vehicles. So here is the first company. They used 12 Panzerkampfwagen, 4 Ausf.G tanks. And you can see that they are very similar to the ones that we have in game. The difference is the Italians hated side skirts, therefore, you know, a lot of their vehicles don't have side skirts, and that would be a visual difference between them and also others. You can see the marking as well on the side of the turret, and also the spaced armor which is sat around it. Another addition could easily be the Pz.III Ausf.N, which would once again not have the side skirts with the short barrel 75mm. We already have this in game, but we also have this in game. What are the differences between these vehicles and the American ones? The Italians at the lower BRs, majority of the time, vast majority of the time, get put on the Axis side of things, right? So therefore you are facing stuff such as Shermans, you are facing stuff such as Cromwells, you are facing stuff such as Allied vehicles. So why in the hell would you give them a bunch of Allied vehicles to face said Allied vehicles? Why not give them the Axis vehicles, which would mean that you would at least keep some originality, some variety when it comes to what you actually face. I'm not very much a proponent of mixed battles. I think they're a terrible idea, and I think when you look at Pz.III and the amount of complaints that have been coming out of it because of it just being a festa of Phantoms and MiG-21 variants over and over and over again, with a few smatterings of T2 and others such as Lightnings in the mix, and then you have all the F-104s added at the same time, I think what you're seeing is a lot of frustration at the higher tiers of the game, and every time I talk to people about War Thunder, the major complaint from the majority of them is top tier. Whether it is the research to top tier, or whether it is the gameplay of top tier. And as a person who just says to them, well, why not just play other parts of the game? Because obviously you enjoy those over these ones. I always get met, with similar arguments to that, but we won't get into that in this video. The main thing to understand is if you decided to add German vehicles, such as the Pz.III or this Panzer-IV-G, or even the Stug 3G, which was also used by this division, this would at least keep some originality between the nations, or between the ideas of Axis versus Allied, instead of adding this mixed battle element which has been done with all of these Italian vehicles. The next one is the Carro Asalto M1441. You can see it right here. This is from Cade, and it's talking about the M1441, which has the 13.2mm. It also has a slightly different gun, and what is interesting about this one is it isn't exactly in the game, but it is very similar to one that we already have in the game, which isn't in yet. This has actually been sat in the files for an incredibly long time, and it's this vehicle right here. Now, you may ask yourself, what is this vehicle? Well, this vehicle is the M14414740. It has been sat in the files since the Italian release of their tech tree. Now, it has an upgraded hull machine gun, and it also has a slightly better gun over the standard M1441. You can see the guns are slightly different. It's a slightly longer barrel, and also it will have more higher velocity. So yeah, it's here. You know, there is literally a solution which is sat in the files for you, but instead you decide to add an M3A3. Instead, you decide to add more American vehicles, even though this one is just sat here waiting to be added. Why? It just seems so weird to me. Such an odd decision. But anyway, that is another one which could easily be added. Now, there is also another one that used to be in the files, but I think it's been taken out. I have no idea where it is. And it's this one. Do you see this? This is another Semavente. Now, I've talked about it in the past how Semavente is not the most powerful vehicle, but at the same time, they are not too bad. This is the Semavente 7534. It's the Burgers-Liari, or however you say it, version of the Semavente. It has extra machine guns on the top, making it unique, but the main thing it makes it is Italian instead of American. Right? So here is another option that you could go for if you wanted to continue with trying to add more stuff to the Italians to make the grind a little bit harder, and also to stop people from getting to the more unique vehicles of the higher tiers, which seems to be what they crave. So there are these options. They do exist. The M1441, which is upgunned, also the standard M1441 with the Breda 13.2mm with the old gun, and also the good old Burgers-Liari. There is many options, right? Many options here. Then you have even more wild and wacky stuff. You could add Italian-born conversions of the M113 if you wanted. You know, that is something. Obviously, the M113, colloquially known as the Gavin, is something that was used by a ton of different nations. It is American by birth, but the amount of variations and modifications done on the vehicle mean that there is a lot of them which are very much interesting, a lot of them which are very much different to the rest. And this is something which I think would be, you know, completely fine in the game. One of the things that the Italian tree did so well when it came out, which is why this pains me when it comes to these American vehicles, is there were a lot of similar vehicles added to the Italian tree when it first came out, such as the Tipo, you know, the Sherman, such as machines like the M47. But they had distinct differences. The M47 has a 105 on it. The Tipo has obviously a different hull or different chassis combination compared to something like the Firefly, even though it has a similar gun. So why can't we have just more variations of stuff like this, such as the M113 with this thing? If we have the R3 running around, why not have this damn thing, or with the SS11s? These machines could definitely be something which we see in the game. Whether it be at mid-tiers, whether it be at high tiers, I'd much more prefer vehicles like this than just straight copy-paste vehicles. But as I said, these are not as economical. These are going to take longer to build. These are going to cost way more money instead of just reskinning a vehicle that already exists. And that is why we have what we have. Then we have a bunch of AB variants, right? This is once again from Cade. Thank you, Cade, for his dedicated work when it comes to these forum posts. He does a great job. And the AB40 series, we have one of them in game. Maybe we have two of them in game, if I can remember correctly. But basically, there is a bunch of different versions. You got the AB40 with the standard machine guns. Obviously, we can't have that. It won't be able to do anything unless you want another M2A2. And if that's the case, then fair enough. You have the AB41, which of course has the 20mm. The AB41AA, which has a machine gun on top. You got the AB42, which was of course a prototype. It had a larger turret and also a modified hull front. want the same engine, and the gun was also the same, so you know, you could have that thick boy. Then you have the AB.41-43, it once again had a larger turret, same 20mm, but a different engine. And then you have the Semavente DAR 4732, the same chassis but with a 47mm on it. This could have easily been put in the place of the M3A3, which was added, but once again, this costs more money. I'm guessing the low tiers are a loss leader, therefore, you know, they're not going to do this. Instead, they're just going to plonk a copy-paste M3A3. Then you have some other stuff. This is the Lancia 3RO. This is the Autocannone truck. It's basically a 90mm that you find on the Semavente 9053 put on a Lancia truck. Now, I've covered this in the past, in a few other videos. I would like to see it in the game. One of the problems with it is that you would need to actually, you know, set up to be able to fire it, but we already have vehicles in the game which would have to do that anyway, which don't have to, so just let this thing rock as it fires. The next thing is the AS.42 Metropolitana Cannon 47. This is just another AS.42, but instead of the standard AS.42, it just has a slightly better gun on it in the form of the 47mm. So once again, another vehicle that could fit into the rank 2, which is available to, you know, actually play with. You can see the 47 one right here, whereas this is the AA one that we have in the game. So, it's not as if there aren't options, especially for the rank 2 vehicles. They exist. They're there. But, they cost more money. Because you have to remodel stuff, you have to, you know, basically get new models into the game, instead of just slapping a camouflage on something and saying, how's your father? And I think that is the main issue that we're thinking here. The fact is, when it comes to copy-paste, I generally despise it. But if it's being done from an economical point of view, I could at least understand it a little bit better compared to what is going on right now. And this goes back to the thing I've been saying for like a year or two. I feel like it's at least a year. When Kirill Yudintsev sat down, CCO of Gaijin, by the way, sat down with Sean, right? Sean, who is a streamer, he works for Gaijin, he also does his own independent projects. His own independent projects are incredibly good. Check them out at the layer of Sean. But basically, when it came to that, they did like a question and answer session. It was as if they were so afraid of saying something like, because it was economically viable, or because we realized if we could make money in this area, then we could put more resources into this area over here. Like, the reason why we do so many high-tier premiums, and the reason why we do helicopters at $60 a pop, because it means that we can get more money towards being able to produce different parts of the game. In order to have a Swedish ground tech tree, there has to be a CV90-105, which costs $60 to pay for the rest of it, right? It would be okay. I think a lot of people would be fine with these statements. And I think if they came out when it came to the Italian tree and just went, look, when it came to these vehicles, we know that they are, we know that they are not the best solutions. You know, they're not the best solutions. The best solutions are the ones you see in front of you and the ones covered in this video. But what they could easily do is come out and say, look, we needed an economical solution and a quick solution to be able to fix this issue, which, if we waited, would be more exacerbated and get more people angry going forward. So we went for the simple solutions, and then maybe later on we'll fill them in with these vehicles. Which to then I will say, fair enough, at least you have a better reason than what you said before, but then I'd point you to these. Because unfortunately, that reason falls apart when you look at stuff like this. And that is the overall problem. Whatever answer they have to this, there is already a solution on the table which would be equal, if not the same cost, as what they've already done, and would make more sense. Apart from one, which is the most worrying one of all. And it's one that has crossed my mind ever since they were added to the dev server. If you look at the vehicles that have been added to the Italian tree, the Sherman 5, the Hellcat, the M3A3, the M4A4, stuff like the Chaffee, for stuff like Japan and China and so on. All of these vehicles are meta vehicles. All of these vehicles are incredibly good at their BRs. The problem with something like a Panzer.IV is it's good, but is it as good as something like an M4A4? I would harbour no. I don't think it is, because of the stabilizer, because of the overall armor, and so on and so forth. So instead of just looking at the economical angle, but also looking at the meta angle, to me, when I look at these vehicles, they've just added some of the better American vehicles to these tech trees, and just bolstered them artificially by these vehicles. And if that's a trend going forward, that's the most worrying one. It really is, from my point of view. Because instead of uniqueness, instead of stuff such as variety being focused on, instead now we're looking at more meta and competitive ideals, which in my opinion is not what War Thunder is about. War Thunder is about playing and enjoying parts of history which you generally would not be able to do without War Thunder or without gaming in general. I can't just pop into a Sherman tank. I can't go and experience what it would be like to drive that thing in some form of visual and obviously keyboard and mouse way. That can't happen unless it happens in War Thunder. So I really hope that these decisions are not being made because of meta decisions. I would much rather prefer the economical ones going forward. Because if that's the case, and we're basing stuff on meta and what people like playing and the strengths of vehicles, then just give everybody Shermans. Just do it. We're already nearly at that point anyway, but just give full trees of Shermans. And I'm sure everybody will be amazingly happy, just like they are with the 7 F104s. Thank you for watching this video. Have a lovely day. I'd like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Battling Bacon, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Conte Baraka, Daniel Stanton, Elove Goat, Jay Wilt, Martinez, Trigger Hippie, Universe, Eugens Terry, and also I'm Devilish and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.